Thanks for tuning in to Season 4 of Strange, Rare, and Peculiar Homeopathy Podcast, where homeopathy lives, breathes, and evolves with Denise Straiges and Alastair Gray. We'll be exploring modern practice, research, and philosophy, from Hahnemann's radical insights to today's breakthroughs and discoveries. Get ready for homeopathy woes, feedback from pros, and the more you knows.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, hello.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks.
All the things. Welcome to the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast. I'm Denise Straiges, and I'm here with Alastair Gray, and together we represent the Institute for the Advancement of Homeopathy, which includes the Academy of Homeopathy Education, home research, and a bunch of clinical initiatives, including the Homeopathy Help Network, which offers acute care, chronic care, complex care, and the only palliative and end-of-life homeopathy service that we know of in the world. We've got people who are trained experts in that. Homeopathyhelpnow.com gets you to all the information about these incredible clinical initiatives, which we're not for profit. So this is not some big salesy thing. We are an educational and research institute, and the quality of care is stellar. You know how we know this? Because I'm going to read a couple of testimonials.
Wow.
We have two announcements, and then we're going to get into our topic, and then in the end, listener comments. How about that?
I love it. That sounds like a good introduction. I feel a little underdressed. With...
You didn't put your lipstick on.
I didn't put my lipstick on, but I will do up a button. How about that?
There you go. Announcements. Session 3 of the History of Healing with you, Alastair Charles Gray. Thursday, May 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern. Register at AHE.
The third session, mainly ancient Greece. All good.
Oh, wow. Cool. And then an open house Friday, May 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern. Register at aheonline.events. How about that?
Love it. Very
Those
good.
were our announcements. And one other announcement is that there are still spots left in our cohorts that are enrolling for September of 2026. We've got spots in our 2-year program and our 4-year program, which are exactly the same. Accredited education. We are accredited by China in North America. We are accredited by Arrow in Australia. We are the only school in the world that meets the criteria for their highest level of accreditation. We are the preferred educational provider for the American Institute of Homeopathy. Our program is validated by the Faculty of Homeopathy in the UK, medical homeopaths, the Australian Registry of Homeopaths, the New Zealand Homeopathic Association.
NZCH, New Zealand Council of Homeopaths, and the Australian Homeopathic Association.
Yeah, so because our programs are delivered all live online, we have time zones that work for people around the world. Anywho, all right. So that's it. Come find us.
What are we talking about today?
First, we're going to do our student practitioner testimonial of the week. This is a thing. Now we're getting all kinds of formal over here. Quote, we have been searching for answers since my child was 2 years old. Every specialist told us the same thing. The only option left was biologics. We refused to give up. When we found the Academy for Homeopathy Education and met Kathy Pyatt, everything changed. She listened, cared, and fought for her child's healing as if it were her own.
Kathy.
Yes. Even when the first remedies didn't help, she kept pushing, adjusting, and supporting us today. After just 1 year, my child is 95% free of psoriasis. His skin, stomach, and eye issues are almost completely gone. After so many years of discouragement, this progress feels like a miracle. We are forever grateful. Oh, how about that?
Damn. Kathy Pyatt and her donkey.
Named Johnny Cash. So that was exciting. We love it. We love these testimonials. It's amazing. And you're not going to hear from us testimonials that somebody got 1 dose of a remedy and ran out of their wheelchair to go perform as if they're Cher. Because healing, if it's not acute, if it's acute, of course, we should see really quick response. But when we're talking about deep chronic issues, we want rapid, which is a relative statement, gentle, super important, and permanent. Those are the 3 things that Hahnemann wanted us to pay attention to. Anywho, all right, so today our topic is around this idea of what kind of case is it? Is it a mental case? Is it a physical case? And why are there so many different kinds of cases? And this sort of all rolls into what it takes to be a homeopath, realistic perspective on it. So before we get on to our topic, though, let's do just a little glimpse into some of the listener comments. I just want to talk about two of them. And this is coming from the place of learning to have a thicker skin. It's the thicker skin department. We got some howlers about allopathic use of remedies. People are really attached to that. So the thing that makes me laugh, though, the one thing is there are people who are like, you guys are too chatty in the beginning. They just want content. And we apologize for that. I have to say, we teach all week long in a really structured way. You calculated how many lectures I gave last week?
You did 5, 10, and a clinic. You did 15 lectures and a clinic.
15 lectures. Most of them are 90 minutes. Some of them are 2 hours. And then clinic is 3-hour blocks plus clinic follow-up. So we do a lot of structured teaching. This is our fun. This is our service to the community for people who want to hear about it. And so unfortunately, we're not going to make this like classes because then it becomes work. And for us, talking about this and getting community dialogue going is why we're here. And yeah, I guess you could just fast forward if you don't like us chatting, or you could go to school or come to our structured lectures. But we do appreciate that there are people who are writing in nice stuff. Anyway, but this is the one that I wanted to read. Where is it? Where we get called a name.
We get called a name? What?
Here we go. You are actually the homeopathy snobs! ! You don't even respond to comments here. I feel like we are. That's what we're doing. Been using homeopathy for my family for more than 15 years now. I don't call myself a homeopath. I'm a self-practitioner proudly. You are the ones that turn otherwise homeopathy inclined people off. Better not to listen.
That's interesting. And I don't know what to say to that.
Well, it's okay. You know what? I feel like when people are defensive, there's something happening in their heart and soul that they need to get out. But I want to be clear that this isn't about the home prescriber who's taking care of an earache in their kid or some.
Exactly. If you're looking at your use of homeopathy, even someone that's not a home prescriber, someone that could be prescribing in a clinic in, I don't know, could be anywhere. It could be the north of somewhere or the west of somewhere. You just see but we see what we see. And
yeah. So just this person, though, who is probably not listening after calling us snobs and saying better not to listen. But I just want to be clear in case anybody has been put off by that. Just to really clarify, we are seeing absolute evidence of harm when people are using homeopathy in ways that are so far off of how it is meant to be. And what that looks like for us, what we're seeing is people who have taken not just dozens, but hundreds of remedies in a short time, hundreds, most of them nosodes, sarcodes, and tautopathic remedies, in other words, made from medicines. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about people taking care of their own kids, just to put that out in the front. And then we'll talk about, we've got a mansplainer.
Oh,
yeah, it's a good one.
I love being mansplained too.
Yeah, you're not usually mansplained too. That's usually reserved for me, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, no
anyway,
worries.
But let's talk. So today's topic I'm excited about because it came up because we were talking about some of the things that students brought up in clinic this week. And a student yesterday, or whatever day it was, day before, Dina, she asked a great question. She said, in the particular case that we had in clinic, it was a child with pretty intense medical issues. So let's just put it that way. She had a number of diagnoses over the years. And so the question was, how is it that the conversation was so medical? And
which conversation?
Say it again.
Which conversation?
Conversation with a client. Sorry. Oh, I know what you're asking. The conversation with a client was really medical. And if we're just looking at not a named condition, but as Hahnemann would say, the externalization of the signs and symptoms of the disease, why the emphasis on the named conditions? The question was, it was a really interesting one because there are cases when you need to address everything through the medical conversation. Hahnemann even talks about this. I actually didn't pull up the quote, the aphorism where in the footnote he says it's about disease nomenclature. I think it might be 81. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. But basically, Hahnemann's saying, even though we don't prescribe on a named condition, it's 81. He says, even though we're not prescribing on a named condition, it's a way that we can understand what each other are talking about. In other words, a type of St. Vitus dance or a type of Sydenham's Chorea, a type of whatever. And
sorry, can I weigh in on this? Because I feel that I've got a bit of insight as to how that might have happened, that some students might be surprised, or some listeners would be surprised about the emphasis on the problem, the complaint. It goes right back to the origins of homeopathy, and Hahnemann is absolutely super clear that our job is to deal with the totality of characteristic symptoms. Now, some people have interpreted that over the years to mean one thing or another thing, but the starting point is always the problem. The starting point is always the complaint. And if the complaint is scleroderma or eczema or whatever, then that's the starting point. But there's nothing that the homeopath can do with that information, because that information's got to be modified.
You then have to individualize based on complaint.
The modification of that becomes, and this is interesting because of the other conversation that we had last Monday, which I was going to weigh in on, and then I thought, because we were being schooled by the school mom, that we probably shouldn't go down that cul-de-sac. But that's what Birminghausen said a homeopathic diagnosis is, right? And he called it very specifically a homeopathic diagnosis. It was an arsenicum ulcer. In other words,
Oh, that's what that means.
that's exactly what it means. So it means that, yeah, there's a problem, we've modified it, and we've located a remedy that best matches it.
Okay.
That's our diagnosis. The lachesis ulcer is the homeopathic diagnosis. And it's a finding after modification of the presenting complaint. Now, because homeopathy got itself into a bit of strife in the late 1800s, right? You know all about that. And things started to fall apart, especially after the Flexner report. I have a suspicion that the confusion that many people have began around that time. When I say confusion, because so many people think that our job is to treat people.
Because it was further exacerbated by that sort of Kentian idea and the misappropriation of the treating the whole person.
That's it.
And then that turns into the Constitution. These things all get muddled around. But this is a slight modification from exactly what our plan was, but I think it makes sense as by way of introduction, which is
When have
okay.
you
So
ever stuck to a plan? That's just never not going to happen.
I know. See, that's the beauty of us getting to do this, because when we're teaching a class or delivering a lecture, we have to stick to the plan. Here, we get to talk about homeopathy, and apparently some people like it and some people don't.
Well,
Yeah. Anyway, what's interesting, once Hahnemann gets to chronic diseases and recognizes Psora as the underpinning of all the ailments that are not venereally acquired, syphilis and psychosis, then he's got to change the nomenclature a bit. And so this is where he comes in, and he's talking about how in aphorism 80, he's talking about Psora comes along, and because it is, he says, the true fundamental cause and engenderer of almost all the other remaining forms of disease, which are numerous, indeed countless. So this idea, separate from syphilis and psychosis, is that everything else springs up from this one place. Remember, when you're reading the Organon, the key is to recognize that, number one, Hahnemann is trying to explain what homeopathy is. He's also trying to clarify the difference between it and allopathy. So he often says things in multiple ways by way of deconstructing a definition and by giving examples. So by the time he gets to after Chronic Diseases publication in 1828, he's then modifying the organ to reflect this new information. And so he now is clarifying that in pathology, this is from Aphorism 80, he says, in pathology books, these countless forms of disease are considered to be self-contained diseases with names such as nervous debility, hysteria, hypochondria, mania, melancholia, imbecility, frenzy, epilepsy, convulsions of all kinds, bone softening, scrofula, scoliosis and kyphosis, bone caries, cancer, fungus, hematodes, neoplasms, gout, hemorrhoids, jaundice, cyanosis, dropsy, amenorrhea, and he goes on, right? And he's saying these are all names of what are thought to be discrete disease entities, but in reality, they are all coming from the same place. And then he says in the footnote to 81, he closes it out, and it's a long footnote. It's like, it's got an A, a B. It's probably more than a page in length, the footnote. But he closes by saying, however, if one still believes that occasionally it is necessary to use certain disease names in order to be succinctly understood by ordinary people, then one should use these disease names only collectively and say, for example, that the patient has had a kind of St. Vitus dance, a kind of dropsy, a kind of nerve fever, a kind of, do you say egg or ague?
Oh, egg. I say egg.
That's what I say, but I've heard people,
Oh, damn. I think this is one for the general public. How
I know, weigh in.
do you pronounce that word? A-G-U-E.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
Anyway, he says, never, however, so that the delusion in these names may finally cease once and for all, that he has the St. Vitus dance, the nerve fever, the dropsy, the egg or ague, since there are certainly not any fixed unvarying diseases by these or any similar names. I love that. I love this conversation.
Oh, you're a snob.
I'm a total snob.
Snob.
Yeah, snob.
Snob.
I'm an intellectual snob, I think, for real. A little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah. Are you? Do you think you were? Can you own that?
I think I am.
Actually, no, I'm going to change that because I don't think having intellectual rigor is being a snob.
No, and you don't have hubris.
Oh, gosh, no,
I
I
think
hope not.
snob goes along with it goes along with haughty and haughtiness, an attitude of haughtiness.
Oh, like the mansplaining thing that we got.
Yeah, that
I'll
one.
read at the end.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that because there is an assumption that we have no idea.
Can I?
When in reality, I have a feeling that he didn't actually listen. I think he's responding to a short, a reel, and not an hour-long conversation. But I digress.
But you digress. Can we just confirm what I think you're saying? I think you're saying this.
Yeah.
That we got to focus on the prize, and the prize is the name of the complaint that the person has. So actually, what I'm doing is just restating my own perspective.
But no, the
But
thing
through
is,
through that modification,
yeah,
we gather the information we need to be able to do our work, but we don't lose sight of what it is. And by acknowledging the medical language, we're able to speak with our colleagues dotted around the healing landscape, the medical marketplace. And
yes,
and as long as we are talking about a kind of, because I really understand that, then it acknowledges that we're still individualizing. We're not allopathic, we're not pathological, or we're not only focusing on the pathology only. We don't ever prescribe on a one leg of a stool, right?
and this is really important because this is where the fallouts in homeopathy really came into play in the late 19th century. Because when Herring and Litt got together and were teaching at the college, their big falling out was about the emphasis on pathology and special pathology and all of the sort of diagnostic interventions. And Herring was fixated on the idea of science. Science!
Wasn't it
And
over the appointment of Rao?
Rao was to have been the chair of the Department of Special Pathology. And what had happened was leading up. Sorry?
I want to be the chair of the department of something.
We can make you the chair of anything you want. Let's do it right now.
All right.
We should get a vote. What should Alastair be the chair of? This is good. Please weigh in, people. This, I think we can have it.
Opinionated snobbishness within our field. Goodness me. It just reminded me that I got an email today addressed to Prof. Yep, dear Prof. Gray. I love that.
Very nice.
Anyway.
So there's this tension in homeopathy. And actually, I love that we're having this conversation because it actually relates completely to episode 117 in the allopathic use of remedies. And this one that got people all hot and bothered, maybe this is actually going to help to explain that because there is condition-based prescribing, and then there is an understanding of not only the externalization of the signs and symptoms of disease, but subsequent to 1816, the beginning of Hahnemann's quest to understand why his original foundational principled method was incomplete. He started as early as 1816 with the recognition that prescribing just based on giving one remedy at a time for the most meaningful totality of symptoms, according to the law of similars and the minimum dose to begin the healing process, that just doing that was not actually doing the bigger job of cure.
The bigger job. Keep going.
The bigger job. So once he gets to that point, 1816, now remember, he's had incredible success. And I think that this is important. And this is actually the way that our program is structured is it's structured actually along the lines of Hahnemann's discoveries. We start with basic acute prescribing because that's basically what Hahnemann was doing in the early days. But then he gets to 1816 and sees the relapsing of conditions. And because of that, he had to ask further, deeper questions in order to address this problem, right? And so what he does is we don't talk about what he did during those years. He says 12 and a half to 13 years that he spent in deep study to try and solve this problem. But at the end, in 1828, with the first initial publication of Chronic Diseases, Their Peculiar Nature and Their Homeopathic Cure, he starts to have a completely different conversation. And that different conversation is one that I think has vexed homeopathy ever since, because if you are looking at something through its deep miasmatic lens, and when I'm using the term miasmatic here, the way that Hahnemann meant it in Chronic Diseases, that pathological names become more problematic than they were before. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And is the addendum to what I was going to say before, which is that all externalizations and manifestations of one of those three diseases, and most of them being psoric in their origin.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, it's really interesting because that doesn't, like when I say that, I'm not that impressed by it, I'm not that moved by it, but actually when I think about it, it's such an astonishing thing to say in human history or in medical history, even if we just focus on medical history, for Hahnemann to be the dude, the German gentleman that articulated the principles of homeopathy and did from, let's say, from 1790 through to, what's that? If we go for 1815, that's 25 years of prescribing acutely.
Yep.
To then make this discovery, have this Archimedes moment in the bath, gets out of the bath and comes dripping down the stairs, yelling for Henrietta, nude and dripping, wringing wet, and says, I worked it out. There's only 3 diseases on the planet. It's a ballsy move because,
totally.
You've got to, it would be very easy to hear that. Like, I'm just going to say it again. There's only 3 diseases on the planet. And then for someone to hear that and go, what are you're saying that polycystic ovarian syndrome. I just realized that today I read that there's a new name. That's what just tripped me up. And
I saw that as well. Yeah.
So that polycystic ovarian syndrome is the same disease as the wart on my knee or the molluscum on my back. It's astonishing to even read that, to think, to conceive of that, and then to put it to the test.
Look how excited I am. I'm doing this thing with my hands. Because, okay, finish what you were saying, but I'm so excited. Go ahead.
It's just, and you can see why I was going to say mates, but you know what I'm saying, the mates that he had around him at the time. And those were the disciples, Gross, Stapp,
my favorite.
Your Philalethes.
That's right.
They were all going, shush, don't say that. Pretty much everyone was saying, this idea is going to get you into trouble.
Oh, totally. And Hahnemann talks about it in the intro. I was reading the intro to Chronic Diseases the other day again. So Chronic Diseases was written in 5 parts, and each of the parts, when it was published, had its own introduction, except I think the second one. But they each had an introduction by Hahnemann that was a treatise on the time and what was happening. And I love that. Look, if you're looking at this, you can see my Chronic Diseases has so many stickies in it. Yeah. But the intro, in the intro to the first, author's preface to the first edition, 1828, I love this so much. Hahnemann says, if I did not know for what purpose I was put here on earth, to become better myself as far as possible, and to make better everything around me that is within my power to improve, I should have to consider myself as lacking very much in worldly prudence to make known for the common good, even before my death, an art which I alone possess, and which it is within my power to make as profitable as possible by simply keeping it secret. But in communicating to the world this great discovery, I'm sorry that I must doubt whether my contemporaries will comprehend the logical sequence of these teachings of mine and will follow them carefully and gain thereby the infinite benefits for suffering humanity, which must inevitably spring from a faithful and accurate observance of the same. Or whether, frightened away by the unheard of nature of many of these disclosures, they will not rather leave them untried and uninitiated and therefore useless. And he goes on to basically to aloe bash. But what I love about that is he's acknowledging that it's so simple and so elegant, and yet you can't wrap your head around it because it runs contrary to the Galenic idea that had come into play, right? Really, from when we moved from that Hippocratic idea of man in harmony with the elements to a disease-based construct, we lose the, how do I even say this? It's like we lose the wholeness aspect, I think is what I'm trying to say. But forget about the fact that there is this thing of chronic diseases, because maybe that goes beyond and over our heads sometimes. But sometimes people will say, why do you even need it? Just find the remedy. But
Plenty of homeopaths around the world that say that.
oh my gosh. And part of it, in all fairness, is because I don't know that it's been taught well. And I believe that some of the secondary source materials on chronic diseases are misaligned in some way. The checklists make me absolutely insane. You know that.
Yeah, they're not so useful. Let me tell you a story, because I've somewhere in my past, I reckon I'd been teaching for about 3 years. I think we're in 2002.
Yeah.
Been teaching for a few years, practicing for maybe a dozen, maybe 10, and I got asked to teach in New Zealand about miasms.
How'd that go?
I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work in prep, and then come the day, there's this guy in the audience. And I remembered the guy in the audience because in my first ever lecture on homeopathy, he was also in the front row of the audience and ended up at the end of my lecture like this.
If you aren't watching the video, Al is sitting back in his chair, head back, mouth wide open, having a snore. By the way, stay closer to the microphone because you're.
Yeah. And I'm introducing you to the great Bruce Barwell, who was a legend of New Zealand homeopathy, and really, in a way, single-handedly was the glue for a couple of decades. You probably practiced for 45, maybe even, I'd say 45 years, and had a big practice, and they just off the main street of Auckland. And we had this banter because I think he appreciated that I was young and trying to do something, and he was this old dog, and he at one point, and he would heckle me in the lecture, but he did it in a really lovely way. He never did it in an offensive way or a difficult way. But I remember him saying, "No, I don't get it. I trust implicitly similars." And over the years, there's too many holes in Hahnemann's theory. There's too many examples of cases that don't fit into the theory. And if the theory doesn't help, then it's not a theory. And it was that sort of attitude. And he said, no, I've come to this place where I only rely. He went back to what you were saying that Hahnemann moved away from. And he went back to similars and just prescribing on what he saw. But of course, by that time, with 40 years under his belt, he's got this perspective and an understanding of different materia medica and cause and all the rest of it. And he gave some magnificent prescriptions over the years.
See, I think I made this confession on the podcast once where I actually, because I taught for a school where miasms it was like a whole other thing in miasmatic prescribing and using nosodes to remove the miasm, which I don't even want to say out loud because I don't want people to take it as if I believe that's how it works. Anyway, there was a time when people were so confused by all of it. I said I think it might have been even two classes where I said, forget it. We're not even going to talk about it at all. And I let it be. But I will say that it has helped my practice and it has transformed my teaching to look at things through this lens of chronic diseases. And this case that we had this week, and it was a kid, I'm just being mindful of not disclosing a lot of information, but she had multiple skin issues in her short life, maybe 6 or 7 different diagnoses. And what was really interesting was I pulled pictures of all of them. And we had seen, the mom had shown us pictures during the consultation of some of the kids' own individual expression of it. And when you saw all of it together, you could see the incredible similarities between all of these quote unquote diseases, each of which had its own name and its own causative factor. Interestingly, this kid had idiopathic, in other words, unknown cause, expressions of some of these diseases. And we know that because it was during COVID and she wasn't exposed to anybody. And so that kind of idea,
Well, that's interesting.
It's totally interesting. And it really goes along with how I think chronic diseases is going to be much more and more understood as we dig deeper into how we treat complex autoimmunity, because this is where Hahnemann's recognition of how diseases work comes into play. Because think about the classification of disease. He says there are three types of diseases. You have a dynamic disease, you have a surgical disease, and you have an indisposition. And you have a dynamic disease, it's either acute or it's chronic, right? In fact, if we're looking at it, if you're following along, this is the section of the Organon from 72? Start 72 to 81. And this whole section, and I'm going from the 6th edition of the Organon, 72 to 81, where he's trying to explain how diseases manifest. Now, if we fast forward to the 26, you take a case of someone who has an autoimmune condition, which this kid has an autoimmune condition, by the way. But you take a case of somebody who has an autoimmune condition, the statistics show that if you have one, I think it's 50% more likely to have another. They don't occur in isolation. Why? Because it's not a singular disease. And so it's the beginning of the understanding of dynamic disease without a vector. In other words, there are not clear causative agents for many, if not most, of the autoimmune diseases. And those that have a vector attached to them are having to be rethought because it is inconsistent. So, for example, the difference between PANS and PANDAS, right? Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disease, either with or without group A strep. So the first incidences of PANDAS, it's published in the seminal article, if you want to find it, it's Sweeto et al. And then just a couple of years later, they came back and said, wait a second. And they had 400 cases, I believe, in the second paper, where they said, these are cases that have the same expression of disease, externalizations of the signs and symptoms of the disease. However, they are not associated with group A strep. Therefore, there needs to be another category. So it's the slash in between the two, right? Now, that is just one way for us to look at it and say, oh, here is the beginning of seeing a dynamic disease through an allopathic lens, because it's the removal of the vector. So causation completely changes. It's got to come from this dynamic place, which, one of the things I've been interested in, you and I have talked about this so much, that why did Hahnemann choose the term miasm when there were a number of other words he could have chosen?
Oh, dear God.
And I wanted to write my dissertation on that, and I got a hard no.
Really?
Yeah, don't you remember
From
that?
Johns Hopkins?
Yes. You don't remember that?
No.
Because I really like intellectual history. I like the idea of understanding, but it was, I think, probably of a few of the ideas that I presented. Do you remember Graham said that it was too broad?
Oh, I remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway, but the reason that I talk about this is because one of the things I think Hahnemann was considering was the part of what miasm meant in the ancient realm had to do with spontaneous generation. Because if you look at something that's rotting and then life comes from it, that's spontaneous generation. How do you get maggots from poop? Think about it. And so this is the heart of chronic diseases, because what were the primary remedies? Remember or maybe not remember to some people, but when Hahnemann introduced this idea, this construct of chronic diseases, he also introduced medicines that had the capacity to deal with these deeper chronic diseases. So he also makes this declarative statement that all remedies are not created equal at this point. And so he recasts the die, he reconsiders the medicines, right? And what did I say? I forget the number because I calculated the percentage. I think it's something like 80%, 70% of the newly introduced medicines are what? Do you remember?
Minerals.
No, not minerals. Go within the mineral category.
Oh, no, I can't.
Carbons. They're carbons.
Got it. Yeah.
And so he looked at carbo-veg, carbo-animalis, graphites. I think I have my list here. But you get where I'm going from. He's looking at this. So he's saying, he's looking at these medicines. And so he's asking a set of questions, right? And the questions that he's asking, this is why he's such an amazing thinker, is because he's not just trying to come up with a checklist like you see in those books that I want to burn, but rather he's asking a set of questions. Okay, so we've got people who are dying. Chronic disease is just leaking oil. Your life force is leaking out of the person, right? And we need to turn that ship around. We need to put life back into an organism, otherwise losing life. That's what it's about, right? Okay, so what does he do? He starts looking at the substances, the remedies that are known to put life back in something. These are the ones that I'm not sure where I got this term. Maybe I made it up. Maybe it's spontaneous generation. Maybe it's somebody else's term, but the corpse reviver remedies. I'm sure that term has been used. But like remedies like carbo-veg, what are those remedies? And he starts looking at some other things like the antimoniums, right? Which, if I have this correctly, it's made from a stag's horn.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, this is why chronic diseases, you have to suspend the limited thinking. You have to suspend pathological thinking. You have to literally come at it from this place of inquisition of what problem was Hahnemann trying to solve when he then came out with chronic diseases? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah.
You seem less than interested.
No, I'm completely interested. I was actually thinking about the answer to your question, but I was also thinking about the answer to a different question as well. And that is that my question to you is, do you find that Hahnemann's conception of chronic disease and the classification of disease makes your job easier?
100%, not 80%, not 50%, 100%. Without it, it doesn't make sense.
So what are the other two miasmatic classifications then? Because we've got the classic three, and then we've got the mixed miasms. And I think most people are in agreement that Psora, syphilis, and psychosis corresponds to what's considered to be the cancer miasmatic classification.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, okay. So you don't associate cancer and the tubercular miasm with Psora and syphilis?
I do. Tubercular miasm, yes. But I think that the cancer miasm is complicated. Not that I'm not saying walk away from it, but I think that I think it's a construct that if you accept that construct, you must accept so many more that then become unfounded. Now, there's some interesting things around it. Is it Margaret Tyler who says that there are higher incidences of cancer in people who did not have the childhood diseases? Margaret Tyler, I think, says this.
Oh, I do. Don't know.
And I haven't taught the cancer miasm lecture in a little while. That one has been off my docket. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's her who says it. And so then it becomes really interesting because then you can say with the eradication based on vaccination that these diseases aren't happening and the increase in the rise of cancers, therefore, right? That's one of the logic streams that you hear deployed around it. I think because now that I'm going to say something that's going to sound like I know more than I do, and I don't mean it that way, but I was going to say now that I understand chronic diseases, and I have to take that back and say, I've opened a crack, and even with the crack that I feel like I've integrated, the cancer miasm doesn't make sense to me in the same way because autoimmunity. See, I think eventually we're going to find that cancer is just a subset of autoimmunity, and therefore autoimmunity is psoric. Can I contradict myself?
Sure.
Can I? Because sometimes I think it's just semantics. Maybe it's not a contradiction, it's semantics. Because one of the things that I have found really compelling is to hear Jeremy Sher talk about what he calls the FARC miasm: fungi, AIDS, radiation, and cancer. The term miasm then becomes, I like to keep it so clean around chronic diseases because that's how, probably just because I teach it, it feels, I don't know, it feels like it needs a parameter. But every time I hear him talk about it, it's potentizing, right? And it's interesting because it's like he's recognizing sort of the depth of disease and the types of pathologies and the types of remedies, and they're all kind of coming together, right? So you got fungi, a classification of creatures, AIDS, a disease, radiation, and cancer. So it's a mix. And yet, every time I hear him explain it, it's like I get potentized because the intel is really beautiful. I think of that as being separate from this foundational understanding. The reason I said that about FARC is because I don't want to throw the cancer miasm out with the bathwater. Do you know what I mean? I think it represents something, but yeah.
And you think it's wildly overprescribed, don't you?
I think carcinosin is one of the most overprescribed remedies, along with staph, sagria, and tarantula.
I don't want to get caught in the weeds, but just go back a bit because I'm intrigued that for me, I always assumed that Hahnemann's sevenfold classification of miasm was met with 5 of those, the names that we ascribed to them. And I was intrigued to see what you thought the other 2 might have been. But now I'm hearing that you're trying to move away from that. So I just wonder where that leaves us. Look, if this is a meaningful model that assists us in our work.
Yeah. But this is why I'm saying don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I feel like cancer miasm is like, what it's okay. It goes back to aphorism 81, the footnote. Say it's a type of this, it's a type of that, rather than it is that. Because that language is meaningful to us. If you say to a homeopath that's such a cancer miasm kind of case, because it's already baked into the conversational cake, that makes total sense. But I feel like our information is incomplete, like the way that the remedy comes about. So Phobister, what year was it? In the 1960s, right?
Earlier, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
So for those who might not know the origin story, so there's this guy called Phobister, and he's at one of the London hospitals in the obstetrics.
He's in guys and he's in obstetrics, yeah.
Do I have it right here?
Sorry, that's
Anyway, so he notices.
Let's not let accuracy get in the way of any good story.
Say it again.
Let's not let accuracy get in the way of a good story.
So I'm saying this without my books, but my recollection is, so it is Phobister, and it is in London, and I think it's in, maybe it's in the 50s, maybe it's in the 40s. Yeah, I think you're right. It was earlier than the 60s. Anyway, he makes an observational analysis. He says children in this maternity ward who were born from mothers who had breast cancer. Was it breast cancer or just cancer? Breast cancer.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Say yes to which one?
A kind of yes.
A kind of yes.
It's a kind of yes.
So that those kids had certain traits and characteristics. They had blue sclerata. They had cafe au lait skin. They had a lot of moles.
Molluscum.
They have hairy back. Were they hairy? They might have, and they might be hairy.
You might be referring to fine downy hair on the back.
Fine downy hair. And then it just grew. And there are people who use this all the time. And then there are all these new introductions, new formulations, the numbers of however many tumors or whatever in there. I don't know if it's just that I'm cautious because I run a teaching clinic and I feel like any word that comes out of my mouth, I better be sure, because I don't want to send people out doing the wrong thing. Or if it's because I feel like I don't have enough data. There are people who feel more confident with clinical information or isopathic applications. And yeah, what do you think?
No, don't want to. No, I don't know. Don't know how to add anything to that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had clinical value from the theory, but never consistently and in every instance.
I know people are going to write in, like, whatever episode number this is, there's going to be a whole litany of things. So I just want to be clear. I'm not saying bad. I'm just saying we're having a discussion like we will at the pub tonight. It will be a discussion about different cases we've seen and different information. And I guess maybe because we kind of have to wrap this up.
What?
We still have to do our review of comments. Okay. So yeah, so I'm not saying bad. It's just, I think that like one of the things that we've been talking about, and this was going to be our topic for today, is this idea of build a better homeopath, a project that we've been working on, that we've been bringing to others in the community. And it's an anchor to build a better homeopathy. In other words, if we want to bring homeopathy back to its rightful place in medicine, then we have to have difficult conversations. We can't just go by what works for me, or I've been doing this, therefore, but rather we need to have some clearer guidelines and more conversations about the things that we don't understand, or the remedies that source materials and stuff like that. I just think it's really important. And it's not winning me a lot of friends, apparently.
Read the comments and then are you saying that not only are we being called snobs, but we've got some haters? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we do.
That's right.
Actually, but let me be fair, because we get beautiful comments. Here's one from Felicity. You guys are too cute and I'm loving all the knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing your chats. I got an email today from a former student who said that our podcast gets her through some dark days, or like it's the light in a dark day, something like that. We get some really nice, comments as well, but then we get
Hit us with the howler.
the snobs. So this, I'm not even going to read the whole thing. It's so long. So this guy basically says, we don't know what we're talking about. And he says, so if someone says the 1816 organon, when we talk about the 1816 problem, that date is probably a mistake or shorthand. And it's just like, he didn't even listen. He watched the reel. I'm not going to say his name. Yeah. He's so I don't know, Sherry, who organizes this, she lists all the comments. Someone mansplaining in reference to the 1816 problem reel. So to clarify, the 1816 problem, I'm not saying, if this guy's listening, I don't think he listens to the podcast. I think he just had a lot of time on his hand to comment on a reel. We're not saying that 1816 was the time when any organon was published, because it wasn't. What we're saying, and he gives us the first organon was published in 1810. Thank you. Like, if he thinks that we don't know this, whatever. But what we're saying about 1816 was when Hahnemann said, I got a problem. And the problem is that the basic foundational premise of homeopathy only works to a certain point. People are relapsing. I need to go back and rethink about it. Hold the line, caller. And he spends from 1816 to 1828 developing what then becomes the chronic diseases, their peculiar nature, and their homeopathic cure, published in 5 installments. As I said before, 4 of them have their own introduction. And then Hahnemann went on to evolve his system over time. And so this guy gives it to us as if we have not heard of it. I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to do anymore. But people, when they're responding just to the reel, which, by the way, reels are meant to be sensational, right? They're to get attention. And yeah, I don't know. Here's one. I haven't read this one ahead of time. This is again on allopathic use of remedies. I have studied homeopathy since 1986. I do not understand how homeopathic meds can be for sale in stores where no education is given on how to dose or how to know what to give, especially oxalicoxanum and 200C products. I do not use any over-the-counter meds and just one prescription for thyroid due to ablation. I think that it's a person's name, somebody's herb shop. Oh, and then goes on. Very good for treatments of grief or greed.
It's interesting that point because there are parts of the world where there are no over-the-counter sales of homeopathics. And when I was getting going in my early years in the south of New Zealand, the only place to purchase homeopathic remedies was from one of 2 pharmacies.
Yeah.
And that was it. There was nothing like the freedom, the permissiveness, the situation that you have in, say, Europe to walk in and get yourself some Nux Vomica 15C, or in the US as it's been up until recent times.
Yeah, it's such a conversation. I can really see so many different perspectives on availability, accessibility. If things aren't available OTC, they're going to be on the black market. And then what happens with the quality? I don't know. And I'm a big fan, although people who have written in maybe don't think so, of self-care for acute and self-limiting conditions, but being mindful that there are times when people are getting in over their heads, right?
But yeah.
Anyway.
Sure is. We got to support our pharmacies as well. Just
Oh my
to
gosh. Yeah.
shout out to them. If a homeopathic pharmacy is triturating, grinding, scraping, succussing, and diluting, then good on them. And we've got to support that work. Our remedies have got to be pure. They've got to be powerful. They've got to be well made. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. That's it. So no other yelling on behalf of our fair listeners. I love it.
We're gonna show up and keep doing it because we're having fun. And there are some people who are enjoying it. And for those who,
It's actually something a little different for me because, yeah, it is fun and I enjoy it. But I also, in this format, I get to noodle out questions that I haven't quite ironed out myself in my own brain. So to articulate them sometimes, these annoying people that process everything out loud.
I know one of them.
Yeah. But it's not my cultural background and it's not my experience of doing that. And so I find this useful you said it really beautifully, or you maybe implied it, but I can tell you what, folks, standing up in front of some really smart students means you've got to be on your game. And it is gone are the days where some charismatic whoever can stand in front of a class of homeopathy students and make stuff up, or at least answer legitimate questions with the patient did well.
Right.
Yeah?
It's like, how well? For how long?
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Exactly. And so because of that, I find this, anyway, you get the point. I find it really useful. Yeah.
This.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. I forgot in the intro. You can subscribe.
Bing.
Let's do it again next week.
All right. All right.
Take care, everybody. See ya.
Ciao. Bye.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today at ahe.online.